What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave. And today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We are going to be talking about 35 cards I think are going to be an excellent investment right now. Not only prior to set 8, where I think they could potentially get better, but prior to rotation, where I think they're really going to have an opportunity to shine with cards from set 1 through 4 rotating out. So if you're looking to get in front of the market on some cards that are down in price right now and some cards that may be worth buying foils of right now, definitely stick around. As the video goes, I'll be throwing some prices on screen for the current market price, both foil and non-foil for these cards, just to keep it as up to date as possible, as opposed to stating it as I'm going through the video. We're going to be going in order by color, so if there's a particular color that you prefer, feel free to skip around to those parts of the video. We're going to be, of course, starting with amber, then amethyst, so on and so forth. If you've ever organized a set of these cards, you have a pretty good idea what order the colors are going to be in. But before we jump into that, as always, a big shout out to the Patreon for making giveaways on the channel possible. We're about 90 subscribers away from another booster box giveaway. So if you want to push that into reality, definitely make sure you're slapping that subscribe button. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the 35 cards that I think are worth buying right now. So the first card, and this is more of an upgrade suggestion from non-foil to foil because it's cheap and it will stay cheap because it's uncommon, is going to be the Prince Vigilant Soldier, a 2-cost uninkable 0/5 stat line questing for 1 with Bodyguard. We're going to be seeing blue rotating out when set 9 drops, and I think the Prince is going to be a very relevant replacement at that point. He may not be gaining you lore, but he's got more defense and he costs less. He's got a very solid stat line. Next up, and this card definitely isn't something that people are sleeping on, but maybe a good time to buy foils, especially with some stuff rotating out, but it's a card that's been seeing play anyway. Then it's going to be the Troubadour Musical Narrator, 2-cost inkable 1/3 stat line questing for 1 with resist 1 and singer 4, just a better Ursula. Then next up, we have a card that people are starting to get more kind of hyped about with the rotation coming. Of course, we're losing things like Ariel and Cinderella, so cards having singer is going to be very relevant. It is going to be Aurora Waking Beauty, a 3-cost inkable 1/4 stat line questing for 2 with singer 5, so the same cost to singer ability as something like Ariel. And whenever you remove 1 or more damage from a character, ready this character. She can't quest or challenge, but she can sing more songs, so she can sing multiple times on a turn. So even though she's not digging up a song like something like Ariel would, she does have a very good secondary ability. Next card I think is a great time to buy and potentially foil out, just because I think it's a good card in general. I think the stat line will be even better once rotation happens, and that is going to be Moana Determined Explorer, a 3-cost uninkable 3/4 stat line questing for 2. No additional abilities, but 3-cost 3/4 questing for 2 is just a solid stat line. Then we have Tiana Restaurant Owner, a 3-cost uninkable 1/4 stat line questing for 2 with whenever a character of yours is challenged while this character is exerted, the challenging character gets -3 strength unless the person who controls the character pays 3 ink, which is crazy. If you get this down early, it's absolutely silly. I've seen a deck, and it's a big commitment to the Tiana play line, but if you can make it work and you're not playing in something like Steel that goes turn 1 Cindy, it can be really good, is taking Tiana and going turn 1 Pluto, turn 2 Tiana, then you're getting her exerted on 3, and your opponent, unless they're playing ramp, it's super hard for them to get ahead and be able to take any challenges. So then they have to rely on direct removal. The next card that's way down right now that I think is a great time to buy this, I feel like last time I looked the card was like a few bucks, like I mentioned, is going to be Prince Naveen Ukulele Player, a 4-cost uninkable 3/3 stat line questing for 2, singer 6, which hasn't been as relevant, but we're seeing more sing together songs coming out, so I think that's going to be really good. And when you play this character, you may play a song with cost 6 or less for free. So good. Free songs is always good. Speaking of alternative strategies when it comes to those Amber Steel decks, we've got Bolt Superdog, a 5-cost uninkable 3/5 stat line questing for 2, shifting for 3, with whenever you ready this character, gain 1 lore for each other undamaged character you have, so potentially gaining you significant lore gains, and you can exert him to banish chosen illusion character. We're seeing a lot of illusion characters in the next set, could make Bolt even better than ever. Then we do have Lady Miss Park Avenue, a 5-cost uninkable 4/4 stat line questing for 2, also shifting for 3, and when you play this character you get to grab 2 characters with a cost of 2 or less back from your discard pile into your hand, which is just really, really good, even if they're going just in your hand. Super, super useful. And the last Amber card we're going to talk about, something that is fairly inexpensive right now, is Simba Pride Protector, a 5-cost uninkable 4/4 stat line questing for 2. Post rotation, it's unclear if we'll have something like that Simba Protective Cub to go ahead and shift onto, but it's safe to say we will be getting more Lion King characters as time goes on, and we definitely have some other Simba shift targets that could be decent. And at the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready your other characters. So great potential combination with something like Bolt. Then jumping from Amber over to Amethyst, our first character we're going to talk about is Honey Marin Northuldra Guide, a 2-cost inkable 2/2 stat line questing for 1. When you play this character, if an opponent has an exerted character, which is entirely likely, is almost always going to happen, in play you're going to go ahead and gain 1 lore. I think she's got a lot of potential going forward with things, something like Goat rotating out. I think those enter play lore triggers are going to be better than ever, and for a cost of 2, pretty good. A card that I think has a ton of potential that hasn't been tapped into yet. It may be a common, but I think it's a great time to be jumping on those foils, is going to be Raja Ghostly Tiger, a 2-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1 with Vanish. So of course, if you're in maybe like that Steel matchup and they have some targeted removal for something like Raja, it may not feel as good when you're playing those illusion characters, but in pretty much any other matchup other than Steel, or even in that Steel matchup, if you're able to run out their targeted removal on your non-Vanish characters before playing them, Raja feels amazing. It's particularly in the Ruby Amethyst, he is really good as a 3/3 for 2. Speaking of enter play lore triggers, another card I think definitely worth foiling out with the Goat rotating out is going to be the White Rose Jewel of the Garden, a 3-cost inkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1 with when you play this character gain 1 lore. And another card, I think this is way too slept on, this card is more inexpensive than I think it should be. I think with the announcement that with rotation is coming a lot of reprints, including Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, which was always a very good card when the game first came out, and could definitely be a very good card again. I think the biggest thing hurting her for a long time was that she didn't have a relevant shift target. With the introduction of Tinkerbell Fast Flyer as a 3-cost inkable 1/3 stat line questing for 2 with Evasive, she all of a sudden has a phenomenal shift target. Definitely a card I think is worth foiling out. And getting down to our last few cards in Amethyst, a card I think that hasn't seen enough play. I think people see this card and just assume that its ability is bad, but if you're playing a super aggro strategy, it's actually very good, and that is going to be Show Me More, a 2-cost uninkable action. Each player draws 3 cards. Yeah, you don't want to let your opponent draw cards, but if you can get a higher value proposition, be that a bunch of characters that are going to quest for more lore than your opponent's characters, or you're going to be able to go wide enough to prevent them from dealing with your board, Show Me More starts to become really, really good. Even after something like a Be Prepared, if you're in that type of matchup, being able to fuel the board with 4 more characters instead of 1 at a time or 2 at a time, it can be really, really oppressive to your opponent. So I think Show Me More is a card that's getting slightly overlooked. We actually just saw set championships reported on by a Lorcana villain, where there was a 9-year-old who took an aggro deck list with 2 Show Me Mores in the deck list to a first place finish in a set championship. Next up, we have Amethyst Chromacon, a 2-cost inkable item with Exert. Each player draws a card. I don't need to explain why this is good. Exact same reasoning as something like Show Me More. You're just wanting to play either lower cost, higher yield characters, so something with a higher strength and cost ratio, something like Raja, or you're wanting to play those characters that quest for a ton of lore super, super quickly. And then all of a sudden your opponent drawing more cards than you isn't gonna matter. And the last card, and another potential draw card, you see a lot of this for Amethyst, is the Library of Gift for Bell, a 3-cost inkable location. We haven't seen locations in the last set, and there's no locations announced for Jafar. It's TBD if we're going to see locations get reprinted in set 9, hopefully. But they haven't been steering into locations a whole lot, and I think that makes the locations that do exist even better. This is around a $6-ish foil right now. I think it's fairly reasonable. They got quite a bit higher than that there for a while. while, and if it's going to be one of the only locations out there and it leading to a potential meta where people aren't teching as heavily against locations, it's going to be really good. I do think it's interesting that we have that new Emerald Steel Maui coming out that has the ability to banish all opposing locations, but we haven't been seeing any locations getting printed. I'm curious what the thought process was behind that one, but the library is our last Amethyst card. Next up, jumping over to Emerald, we have Fred, Mascot by Day, a 1-cost inkable 1/1 stat line questing for 1, with whenever this character is challenged, gain 2 lore. Obviously, he is going to be getting a new shift, a Floodborn that's going to be able to shift down onto him, so your opponent's going to be even more likely to want to get him off the board very quickly. I will say, even when they're doing it with removal and you're not gaining the lore, the value proposition is almost always beneficial to you, in the sense that they're probably spending more on the removal they're using than Fred is costing you to get on the board. A card that I think is maybe not the greatest card in the world, but if Lady and the Tramp continues to get better, is potentially a good card to be buying foil now, is going to be Lady Elegant Spaniel, a 1-cost uninkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1. But if you have a Tramp in play, she's getting +1 lore, so she is potentially questing for 2, a little bit better stat line than something like Lilo or those Maleficents that we saw in Chapter 1. Speaking of uninkables, we have Mr. Smee, Efficient Captain, a 3-cost uninkable 3/3 stat line questing for 1. He is a villain, a pirate, and a captain, so he's got some great subtyping, and whenever you play an action that isn't a song, you may ready chosen pirate character. There's going to be a lot of stuff that's taking advantage of that, I think, in the new set, so I think he's potential to have those foils go up in price. Another card that's definitely been going up in price in those foils is Prince Philip, Royal Explorer, a 3-cost inkable 3/2 stat line questing for 2, and he does have Ward, so Ward always a fantastic ability to be able to close out those games, to get a character down that your opponent really is going to have a hard time doing anything about, and then just go ahead and win the game by questing for 2. Next up, a card that is starting to see a little bit of play, but is a card that I think hasn't quite been tapped into its full potential yet. I think the card's really solid. Obviously, it's a lot more expensive than those Alice's, but it is inkable. He is going to be Goofy, Expert Shipwright, a 5-cost inkable 1/4 stat line questing for 3. He does have Ward, so same as those Alice, and he does have the same ability as Alice. Whenever this character quests, chosen character gains Ward until the start of your next turn. Alice, of course, also gives them +1 lore, so her value proposition is definitely a lot higher, especially with the same stat line. But I think Goofy, Expert Shipwright in like a Emerald Sapphire deck or something like that, where you need to not have more uninkables, like you can't fit Alice into that deck list, I think Goofy could be a cool alternative, especially because you're going to have plenty of ink to be paying the difference. Next up, a card that I think has always obviously been really good, came out as a super expensive foil and then died down pretty significantly, is Baymax Giant Robot. I think they're around $2 to $3 for foils right now. It's a 6-cost uninkable 5/5 stat line universal shift 4 questing for 2, and when you play this character, if you use shift to play him, remove all damage from him. So if you're shifting onto something that has damage, you're going to be able to heal it, so it's always great to get those challenges at first, then shift him, and then potentially use him to sing in the following turn if your opponent's not able to take him off the board. But universal shift means he can shift on anything, only character we've seen with that ability so far, and I gotta tell you, the foils do look pretty. Another card that has seen some meta play, but I don't think has seen its full potential tapped into, is Fantastic in Emerald Sapphire. I think also has potential in some other Emerald combination decks, is going to be Peter Pan Neverland Prankster, a 7-cost inkable 4/6 stat line. This character enters play exerted, and while this character is exerted, each opposing player can't gain lore unless one of their characters has challenged this turn. The thing that's really interesting about this card is it does completely shut off locations, so locations gain lore at the beginning of your turn. If a character hasn't challenged, your opponent can't gain lore, it means their locations do nothing until they get your Peter Pan off the board. This is a card I think is pretty funny for the potential of things like that Mr. Smee or other pirate shenanigans going into the new set. I think Emerald Steel Pirates has a lot of potential, and that is going to be Prepare to Board, a 1-cost inkable action. Chosen character is +2 strength, +3 if it's a pirate. Obviously, decent to give your characters +3. It doesn't draw you any cards, it's an action, so it doesn't replace itself. However, when you need to get that sneaky challenge in and take something out when your opponent thinks you're not going to be able to, Prepare to Board all of a sudden starts looking a lot better. So that is all of the Emerald cards, so we're going to go ahead and jump over to Ruby with our first card, which is going to be Card Soldiers Royal Troops, a 1-cost inkable 1/2 stat line questing for 1. With while a damaged character is in play, this character gets +2 strength, so it can potentially be a 3/2 for 1 and take some banging challenges right at the beginning of the game. Another card that can get bigger depending on that damage and do some sweet challenging is going to be Queen of Hearts losing her temper. This is a card I've been talking about since last set. Foils are still fairly inexpensive, and I think with the impending rotation and losing some of those stronger bodies in those Ruby Amethyst decks, Queen of Hearts starts looking even better than before. She's a 2-cost inkable 1/4 stat line questing for 1. While this character has damage, she gets +3 strength. 1/4 stat line is decent to begin with on a 2-cost body. The fact that she is getting +3 strength as soon as she has damage on her just makes her really good. And the one other Ruby card we're going to talk about, a lot of Ruby cards are not slept on. Ruby is a heavily played color, so that's why we're not talking about a ton of Ruby cards, but one I think could potentially be slept on, especially post-rotation, is Aladdin Intrepid Commander, a 4-cost inkable 1/4 stat line questing for 2, shifting for 2, and when you play this character, your characters get +2 strength this turn, so almost like a Cricky ability, but he costs less to play. His stat line is not as good as Cricky's, obviously, but being able to give all your characters +2 strength when your opponent may not be anticipating it, especially in combination with something like Steel, where those challengers can really take advantage of being able to challenge with a strong attack. You play him after something like Calhoun and use her to attack for 5. All of a sudden she's taking the most threats off the board in the early turns of the game. I think Aladdin's a card that hasn't been explored enough. We entirely skipped Sapphire, because Sapphire is a color that I think has been explored inside and out. There's not a lot of cards that I personally feel like are slept on. There's cards in Sapphire that are fantastic and they're getting played. There's cards in Sapphire that are bad and they're not. So we're going to jump right over to talking about Steel and several cards there, one of which, or the first couple of which, are not cheap cards necessarily, but they are cards that are down in their price right now, particularly when you look at the foils. The foils are way cheaper than they were maybe a month or so ago, and the first one of those is going to be Calhoun Marine Sergeant, a 2-cost uninkable 3/2 stat line questing for 1, resist +1, and when she banishes something, you're going to gain 2 lore. She is so good. She is one of the best cards in Steel. I think the fact that foils were $30 was a little crazy, but I think also the fact that they're maybe like $16 or so now is a very cheap price for a foil Calhoun. It could be a great time to be buying Calhoun. Another great time to buy card is Doc Bold Knight, a 2-cost uninkable 1/3 stat line questing for 1. Another card that isn't cheap, but I think a good time to buy it. And when you play this character, you're going to discard your hand and draw 2 cards. If you have an empty hand, you discard nothing and you still get to draw those 2. This is a card I think has a lot of potential as a shift target going into rotation when we're going to be losing some of those more relevant shift targets in certain colors, and that is Jim Hawkins, Stubborn Cabin Boy. Really the whole Jim Hawkins shift line, him and the bigger one. He's a 2-cost inkable 0/4 stat line questing for 1 with during your turn whenever a card is put in your inkwell, he gets Challenger +2. Keep in mind that Challenger +2 does carry over to the bigger Jim Hawkins, so if you ink something first then you shift, that big Jim Hawkins is going to come down and be able to challenge that first challenge for 7, which is crazy as he is a 5/5 stat line. 5-cost uninkable 5/5 shift 3 quest for 2, and when you play him you get to deal 1 damage to an opposing character. So all the things he's doing are great. He deals 1 damage to something and potentially challenges for 7 on that turn 3 shift, which is just so good. I'm just going to talk about a couple more Steel cards and then we'll wrap it up. The first one, and certainly not the least one, is going to be Jafar, Aspiring Ruler, a 3-cost inkable 3/2 stat line questing for 2, and when you play this character, chosen character gets Challenger +2. Again, this is a card I think will be super relevant post-rotation when Crab is no longer in the meta. If Crab is reprinted, maybe things could be different, but we're still looking at a Jafar meta. We have a set called Reign of Jafar coming out, so I think Jafar is going to be potentially really good for the sets to come. And getting into the last few Steel cards, the next one is going to be Pluto Guard Dog, a 4-cost inkable 1/5 stat line questing for 1 bodyguard, and while he has no damage, he gets +4 strength, so he's potentially a 5/5. This is a card that's really dependent on what happens with the meta. If we stay in a Steel heavy meta, Pluto may not be the best option, but if we move towards a non-Steel dominant meta, Pluto starts to look a lot better, and I think those prices, especially on the foils, will be looking to go up. Card that I think is probably one of the most slept on cards at all right now in Steel is going to be Miss Bianca, Unwavering Agent, a 6-cost inkable 5/5 stat line questing for 1. However, if you have an ally character in play, she is going to cost 2 less to play, only costing 4. to get down and being perfectly on curve to seeing something like a Whole New World, a card I'm predicting based on its prizing potential at Worlds is going to be getting reprinted in the next few sets, if not in Fabled in one of the subsequent sets. And losing something like Ariel, losing some of those singers, Miss Bianca on 4 can be really good. A lot of times you don't necessarily need to be singing Whole New World on curve with Ariel, so like Ariel on 3, Whole New World on 4, but turn 5, that is when you want to be singing Whole New World. So getting those Biancas down on 4, especially with all of those new allies that are coming out, huge amount of support for allies, not to mention a ton of great allies already in the game. Miss Bianca is a card that should not be under $1 as a foil. This is a card I predict will definitely be going up. And the last card in Steel that I think could potentially be good right now, kind of for the same reason as the library, is going to be 7 Dwarves Mine. I think those few locations could potentially be really good if people aren't strategizing against them. Not to mention Doc is very good, so combining those two together is very good. It is a 2-cost inkable location, 2 to move in, 6 willpower, gains you 1 passive lore at the beginning of each turn, so all of that's pretty decent already. It's a little expensive to move in. However, if you're moving in those nights like that Doc Bold night, or even Happy, maybe some of those other nights, we don't know what kind of nights we might get in the future, you are going to be able to deal 2 damage to an opposing character, so it's a great way to clean up characters that have damage on them already and just further control the board with moving some stuff around. So those are my 35 cards in Disney Lorcana right now that I think are 100% worth buying, particularly worth foiling out those sets if you're somebody who likes that kind of thing. If you like my list, please let me know. If you think there's a card that I missed that is being really slept on, is super cheap right now, definitely let me know that in the comments as well. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out a ton to get promoted to people like you who may enjoy this same kind of content. And when you see those toys, video games, and cards worth foiling out off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.